Good morning and welcome back to Professional Insights, brought to you by the National Referral Network. It's been a couple of weeks since we've been here, so welcome back. Today's topic's interesting. We're going to talk about passing generational wealth down and transferring that to our kids and grandkids. We're going to dive into the art of doing that and some of the things that experts talk about on the most effective ways of doing that. And I'm thrilled to introduce Mike Clarke. He's been on here quite a few times. He is the co-founder of Protection Point Advisors, and a firm that is really dedicated to financial literacy and helping you make informed decisions. But before we jump into the topic, please hit that like and subscribe button. And any questions that you have, please post them. We will get to them. But without further ado, let's get started. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, sir.
Man, that was a tough one. I don't think I've ever fumbled that much.
I don't know. You got through that,
Yeah,
that was okay.
Just okay. Exactly.
Sometimes you're the windshield, sometimes you're the bug, right?
Right.
It just we never know which is which.
I thought for a second I was going to pull a hamstring or something. I was like, geez.
Yeah, you gotta go stretch.
Okay.
Anyway, yes.
So
sir.
let's get into the art. Yeah,
Yes.
Art of passing down wealth. And so, kind of starting from the beginning, when thinking about transferring wealth to the next generation, where should somebody start?
Well, generally, I think you need to start with, why do you want to do it? And I know that might seem like an oversimplified question, but, you have to really think about if you're going to pass your estate on to your heirs, and 99% of the time it's kids and next generation stuff, those that are in our immediate families. I think the first thing to do is to consider, who do you want your beneficiaries to be, and also to consider who your beneficiaries actually are, and if they are in a position to handle what in some cases might be a sizable bequest.
And so with that, I mean, there's a lot of challenges in there, but what are some of the common challenges that families face when planning these generational transfers?
The common challenge is people don't do it. I mean, I've joked before that getting your estate plan done is like getting a hip replacement. You probably need to do it, but you're going to wait until it hurts, till the pain gets so bad that you have to. That's often how it happens. Now, for those that are uninitiated and new to this process, it's not as simple as drafting a will. You could legally, you could write a will on a piece of paper and say, I give my car to my son and my baseball cards to my other son, and the house goes here, and you could design the flow chart any way you want. But that doesn't mean that the local authorities, in my case, the County of Los Angeles, because that's where I live, but counties and local jurisdictions will, if all you have is a will, then what will happen is they will get involved and they will essentially administrate the terms of the will. That's a process known as probate. It will flow through the probate court, and probate is a process. It's rather expensive. It usually runs about 6% or so of whatever's in the probate estate. So if you have assets that are going to flow through that process, then you're going to lose 6% of their value, because that's what the local jurisdictions and the state and local jurisdictions are going to charge you to administrate it. So to avoid that, and I'm guessing most people know this, but in case you don't, to avoid that, it's a great idea to draft what's called a revocable living trust. It means those assets that would otherwise flow through probate are now owned by a trust. And since the trust has a life beyond you, that means those assets don't flow through probate, but will pass by operation of beneficiary designation vis-a-vis the trust. It's the most common way of drafting an estate plan. It's the most common way of avoiding the most obvious expenses. But getting back to my earlier point, why do you do an estate plan? For a couple of reasons. Number one, to protect your beneficiaries from what? Okay, and it would be unnecessary expensive transfer, themselves and each other. Okay, So there's a good deal of planning that goes into this, but most notably, if you start by thinking about who gets what and what's the best way to pass it to them.
So how important is it to involve that next generation in those conversations?
Well, initially, I don't think it is, because initially what you want to make sure of is that the flow chart that you want, in other words, your beneficiary flow chart, is in fact what you want. You want to, first thing to do is, if you have assets of really any significance, and if you own a home, for example, which is the most common example, then the home really, if you want to pass it to your kids, it really should be owned by the trust, because it would otherwise flow through probate. Okay. Assets like insurance policies, retirement plans, anything where you can name a beneficiary does not have to be part of the trust, because it passes by operation of beneficiary designation. Okay. So there's a little bit of a differentiation there, but anything that's otherwise going to flow through probate needs to be in a trust. But you also want to make sure that it accomplishes what you want to accomplish. Okay. Which is why I get back to the idea of, well, think about who your beneficiaries are and the conditions under which it's a good idea to leave them a bequest, and the conditions under which it's a bad idea. For example, probably not the best idea to leave a 21-year-old $1 million or something like that. Most trusts don't do that. Most trusts specify specific ages where beneficiaries get their bequests. It's often 30, 35. I've even seen it as high as 45 or 40 or 45. So in other words, consult with the attorney, and then make sure that, and a good attorney, by the way, should be asking you all these questions and really making you think about what you want. But make sure, first and foremost, that your estate plan accomplishes what you want it to accomplish. Okay.
But at some point, Mike, I mean, and we've had these stories, right? All of a sudden, parents pass away, their kids don't know what is really happening.
Right.
So is there a point in time that you ought to bring in those kids?
Yeah, I think once you're satisfied that your estate plan is what you want it to be, then yes, by all means, talk with your beneficiaries about what you've done, why you've done it. Okay. First, it might avoid some discord. I mean, there was a book I read once, and it was written by an estate planning attorney, and he made this point. He said, you'll never know the character of anybody until money's involved, and then you'll know in 5 minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
And that really is true. So, first and foremost, talk about why you did it. Avoid maybe any discord. Give an example, right? Okay. And by the way, a good attorney is going to help you avoid the mistake I'm going to illustrate here. But one of the examples he gave in the book, and I've actually seen this before, is he had a client that had 2 kids. And what they had decided to do was to pay for the wedding of each kid, right? Well, their daughter gets married, and they give her, I don't know what it was, 25,000 or whatever. Here's 25,000 for the wedding. Their son wasn't married, okay, and had no prospects therein. And they just thought, well, if our son never gets married, we'll just leave $25,000 more to the son to equalize the gift. All right. Well, they died. They thought that was fine. Well, they died about 20 years after they had given the first gift to the daughter, and the son never did get married. When the estate was settled, he not only wanted the additional 25,000, he wanted 25,000 plus interest backdated to the date of the first gift.
Oh, okay? Wow.
Yeah. And you know what? Technically, he's right when it comes to equalizing the gift. What do you think her response was?
Absolutely not.
All right. So that created a big giant schism there, and that wasn't pretty. And I've actually seen that happen before. So that's just one example of a mistake. Another mistake is co-trustees. We have 2 kids. Let's make them co-trustees. Yep. Well, no, because first of all, no trustee can misappropriate what's in the trust. Their job is just to do the distribution. Okay. So they're just the worker bee. But if you got 2 of them, they both have to agree, and then it can be a mess. Okay.
So how do you address those family dynamics, Mike? And I know that's a big question to ask.
Well, you got to talk openly. You got to say, this is how you just got to get it out on the table. It's like any other family discussion. You got to air it out. Okay. But I am a big believer in this, only because most estate plans, in spite of the fact that they are properly constructed, fail. And the reason they often fail is because beneficiaries treat their bequests as found money. They're simply not prepared. And the bigger the estate, the bigger the problem. So preparing your beneficiaries for what is to come, preparing them, or at least talking to them about why you did what you did, what you value. I mean, look, if you're going to pass assets, pass the values that created the assets. And that's what really this is about. It's not easy. I'm not saying it is, but it's super necessary.
Now, you've worked over the last, I'd say, year, putting together a family mission and some governance.
Right.
What are some of the benefits that you see in putting together that family mission and that governance structure for managing some of this process?
Well, we created something in our firm called a family constitution. And really what it specifies is the values that the family wants to perpetuate. You know, like, this is what our legacy means from a values perspective. Okay. So it's a companion piece to the estate plan. And it allows all the family members generationally to get on the same page. It allows the heirs to sort of understand at a very deep level what was important to mom and dad, or what is important to mom and dad when it comes to money and assets and all that stuff. And it really asks the beneficiaries to perpetuate something meaningful, you know. So it's something we can create for families who want to dive into that level of specificity. I would say it becomes very, very, the more the wealthier the family is, the more necessary I think that becomes.
And the wealthier the family is, the more that philanthropy comes into play. And so how can families incorporate that into their living trust or into their plan overall?
Well, I mean, that's easy. I mean, it requires some specificity, like, who do you want to benefit? And sometimes it can, in the case of very wealthy families, it can necessitate the creation of different trust instruments, charitable remainder trusts and things like this. But it really is first and foremost about what you want your legacy to mean, and how everybody who has a seat at the table is going to play a role there.
And so what are some of the key trends or some of the risks that you see kind of emerging in the future that families need to prepare for more than others?
Well, I think first and foremost, generationally, we need more education when it comes to money itself. Our beneficiaries really need to understand how money works. It's intimidating, but it doesn't have to be. It requires, a little bit of study, a little bit of literacy, but I've always maintained that taking care of your money is like taking care of your health. We understand enough about how our bodies work to take care of them. Most of us understand how to eat, that we should exercise occasionally, we should sleep well, do all the basics. So I think where money's concerned, rising to the same level of literacy, I think, is a really, really good start.
And in addition to that, I mean, we talk about this, and which is why we do these interviews, is building that financial team. So to bridge that gap of your financial literacy and the actual market, what are your thoughts on the importance of building that financial team?
Well, it's vital. I mean, your team members all have to work together. If you have an accountant, if you have a trust attorney, a financial advisor, whoever's on the team, they should occasionally interact with one another because they're all working on your behalf. It's not like they're talking a lot. It might be that if you're doing your estate plan, then your financial advisor, your trust attorney are going to speak more than they normally would, but that's necessary because they have to, maybe adjust beneficiary designations here and there. And there are a lot of logistical concerns, but you really do want the right team, and you want to make sure that your team understands you. And that, again, I go back to my original comment, which is it all starts with, what do you want? What are you doing this for? What does it mean? And that's often the hardest question to answer. It's easy to go into an attorney's office and almost let them tell you what you should do. And maybe that's partially correct. We are looking for professional guidance, but they shouldn't tell you what you want.
Right.
You should be the one telling you what you want.
Right. And so with any of these, some of the things, right? Some of the questions that we should ask, we don't even know that we don't know to ask. So any final thoughts, Mike? Anything that somebody should know when it comes to transferring wealth that we didn't talk about?
Well, you should be somewhat familiar with why you should do it from an expense standpoint. Okay. You should be familiar with why you should do it from a beneficiary standpoint, meaning, think about who you want your beneficiaries to be, and then think about them as people. Who are they prepared? Uh, and and if they're not, be honest with yourself about that. Be honest with your if you're married, with your spouse about that. Then be honest with the attorney who's drafting the trust, who you're working with, about that. Okay. That level of honesty is key. You have to be willing to maybe confront some, I don't know, not some, occasionally some truths that are not always pleasant, but you got to do it.
Yep. So clarity is key. I've heard that in multiple arenas.
It is.
Being clear, being honest. Mike, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Any questions, leave them below. We'll get to them. These questions drive these conversations. Please hit the like and subscribe button. We are here for the most part every Tuesday. But thank you again, Mike. Appreciate you being here.
Hey, always a pleasure. Thanks.
Okay, talk soon.